It is possible to create nice looking ArchViz with Eevee, which I didn't think was possible, honestly. When, Eevee was announced, this real-time renderer for Blender 2.8, everyone was talking about how amazing it was, and I was like, yeah, it's probably not going to work for interiors, which is what I mainly do, right? Because interiors are all about like light bounces, like bouncing light around and shadows, and I just didn't think it would be possible. But it is. So I was inspired by seeing actually some of the tutorials on YouTube with some people who made some interiors with Eevee, and I was like, that's better than I thought you could achieve. So I discovered that it's different than working with a ray traced engine. You do have to, know which settings to use and, spend a little bit longer setting up your lighting and shadows. And initially I was against that. I was like, oh, that's going to slow me down as an artist. But actually it's the opposite. Like, yeah, you spend a little bit of time on that, but you make up for it in waves, in quantums. I don't know. You make up for it with not having to render. This scene here probably would have taken me double the amount of time if I was to build it in cycles. Because with cycles, you add in an object, you put in some furniture, you hit render, and you have to wait 5 minutes. And of course, nobody sits staring at the screen while it's rendering. You open up YouTube, you check your email, an hour has passed and you forgot that you rendered something. And then you go back to it and you keep getting like dislodged, and it keeps like interrupting your workflow. Eevee is not like that. You add in materials, you can make decisions on the fly. So you can think creatively and make iterations way faster with Eevee. So it's pretty exciting. I'm honestly like thrilled by this. This was initially just a pilot project to see what could happen. And I think it's ready. I think it's ready to be used for ArchViz, architectural visualization. So in this video, I'm going to spend this first part explaining the light and shadow settings, talking about light bleed and lamps in Eevee and how they're different to cycles. Part 2 is getting into more of the materials, reflection probes, that kind of thing. And then part 3 is adding in all the different furniture. We're going to be using a lot of assets from Polygon. I'm not going to show you how to model things like the chair, for example. But in part 3, I explain why that is and why it's not a bad thing to use asset libraries. And it's not just because I own an asset library. There's more to it than that. But anyway, guys, I hope you like this series, and if you do, please give it a thumbs up so other people can find it. Without further ado, let's start. All right, so got the default scene open here, and I'm not going to delete the cube. Going to keep this guy because this is going to be our room. So I'm going to put the camera inside the room, and this is going to be the room. A little small, and I think at the start it's important to get real world units into play. And by that I mean like these units right here, so the dimensions of your object, which, if you're from that one country left in the world that doesn't use metric, you could change to imperial. But anyways, the real world unit for floor to ceiling is about 2.4 meters, generally for like an average home. So you could change that there. But I've found out that like rich clients, wealthy clients, tend to use like a higher ceiling. So around about 2.74, I don't know why that's like rich. It's like superfluous, right? Like extra money spent on heating because I can afford it. I don't know. I've heard that higher ceilings can make you feel more creative. I don't know how accurate that is. Anyways, so what I'm going to do, just to make this easier, I'm going to move this up so that my holding down control, move this up so that it's resting on the grid floor, which is going to help us model it. And then I'm just going to grab this one face at the top here, and then where it's got the Z amount there, I'm just going to set this to 2.74. And there we go. And now that I've done that, what I can do is scale it on everything but that Z axis. So if you keep that there, just watch this. If I get S to scale and then Shift Z, now you can see the 2.74 amount there stays the same, right? So now I can make this however big I want the room. So yay, it's got real world units. So I want to put my camera inside this box here. So in front view, I'm just going to go perspective mode as well. right about here. And then to make my camera snap to this location, I'm going to hit Control Alt number pad 0. And there we go. Pretty simple. So I want to have a window on the left-hand side here, and you could model this yourself, add in some loop cuts, and then delete the face. Trouble with that is that if you want to move the window, you got to like deal with all these loops and everything. I'm not a big fan of it. So I prefer to actually use a boolean object. So what I mean by that is a secondary object like a cube, which is going to subtract from this shape. So if I select my room here and then go to the modifier stack and add in a boolean modifier, and then using this eyedropper tool, we're just going to select that new cube there. By default, 2.8 finally has difference selected by default, which is the one that you always need, so that's good. It is actually working right now, but it's obviously being blocked by the cube itself. If I hit H to hide it, you would see that it is actually working, it's just blocking it. But you don't want to have to go like, move it, hide it, unhide it, whatever. So it actually helps to go to the context panel. I don't know if that's was that the name before 2.8? Object? Maybe that's the, oh, they're all called context. I assume that's a bug. Anyway, if you go down to viewport display, down in here, you can change the display as, so the maximum amount of detail that would be displayed in the viewport, you can set that to bounds. And that basically just means it'll only ever show up as a wireframe in the viewport, which is nice. But it's not cutting a hole in it. Like it's not like there's not a hole for the window because this is like one solid mass right now. There's no thickness to the walls. So we can fix that by adding a solidify modifier right there. And then we position this above the boolean because the modify operator works top to bottom. Now you can see that we've given some thickness to our cube wall there. And now the boolean is able to operate and actually create a cutout, which is nice. A couple of things though, because we scaled up this cube here, this scale measurements here they're out of whack, which means when you go to UV unwrap something or like the value that you put here for the solidifier, it's all dependent on these scale values. So you generally want to apply the scale, Control A, apply scale so that all those reset to 1. Now this thickness amount here will actually matter. So let's turn, let's go that, but it's adding the thickness to the inside of the room, which I don't want, so let's make it appear on the outside, like that. And that is good. Now, if we were to render this right now, by the way, you would see that actually the cube is rendering, okay? Because although we made this the wireframe view, it's still going to render it. So the way you hide it from rendering is in the outliner. And I'm not sure, but like in the latest couple of, because I'm obviously working on 2.8, which is still in beta, but the latest version, it hid by default the render icon. I'm not sure if that's going to be there in the official, but you can bring it back just with the filters here. You can decide how much detail is shown. So that's the one we're looking for, render, and I'm just going to uncheck that. And now when you do a render, it will actually, it will hide the cube, which is what we wanted all along. Okay, so let's just move this. I'll make this a little bit tall, so it's sort of like a floor to ceiling-ish looking window, like so. And if we went into rendered view mode, this is what we would see. Not much, but we don't really have a lot going on. So we've got our light, which is up here. And if we moved this to the side of our box, we can see we've got light coming in. But wait, what's this? Dun, dun, dun. Light bleed, bleed, bleed. This is something that anyone who has experimented with Eevee has come across. And honestly, it's probably like if you were to like look at like a Google Trends or something and you typed in Blender Eevee, I guarantee you like all the top results are light bleed, light shadow, like all sorts of problems with lighting. Like that's really a lot of the setting up that you're going to do with Eevee. A lot of that getting things right. Like it takes a while to figure out. Like just if you've never used Eevee before, it feels buggy. Like that was my first impression. Like, Eevee, so buggy, because you'll fix something. Like, okay, so here's an example. This is what everyone says to do. This is what a lot of tutorials say. They're like, you just turn on contact shadows. You turn on contact shadows and then you increase the distance, and look at that, the shadows disappeared. Haha, I mean, the light bleed, sorry, has disappeared. Seems like a solution until you move around the scene and you look in the bottom left-hand corner of my screen. Hang on, is it there? You can sort of see like a little bit of light coming through in the bottom there, and in the top right-hand corner, there's a little bit of light, right? And that's because that's not how you're supposed to get rid of light bleed. That's like a cheat that's not designed for this at all, and it will cause all sorts of problems. Contact shadows is a very powerful little thing, but it's like, it's applying an extra shadow over the top of the scene, and it's view dependent, meaning that the reason that you're seeing this light coming through in the top there is because based on what my screen is looking at right now, this window right here, it's only able to see the wall up to there. It doesn't know that the wall continues, so it's view dependent. And actually, now is probably a good time to do this. I'm just going to, this is a chair that we are actually going to use in the final scene. It's from Polygon. You can download if you want. But I'm going to add this in now because we need something to, oh, come on. The one time. Oh, gosh. It always, hey, see, come on, right? I'm not crazy. I did the exact same action, just at a different time, and it works anyway. Anyway, I'm dragging in this chair now. I'm just, this is the easiest way I do it. You drag in the dot blend, which for those who don't know, just to do that again, you can drag a dot blend into another one. Then you just click append, and then I'm going to go collection, and I'm just going to click the name of this chair. So yeah, anyway, I am going to use this in the final render, but the reason I'm adding just this right now is because we're talking about shadows and all sorts of things. So it helps to have something going on in your scene. So anyway, lost my train of thought. Selecting my lamp here. Okay, so contact shadows. Yes, it's very important, but it's not designed for this. And you'll see actually, like as I move around here, like look what the problems that contact shadow causes on this chair here, right? It's not designed for this at all. In fact, here's a little render animation that I did, and you can see as the plants like move around or disappear, or like the chairs or whatever against the wall, you get all this weird shadows like flickering and appearing and disappearing. That's contact shadows. I'm not sure how much better Unreal Engine is at this, but it's not designed for this. So contact shadows are important, but they really should only be used as like a tiny little influence, something like that, with like really small values at like a really soft thing. It should be used almost like ambient occlusion, at least for an architectural scene, since that's what I'm focusing on right now. The way that you get rid of light bleed like this is there's a number of different ways, and I'm going to tell you the way that I've looked at all the different methods, and as far as I know, this is the way to do it. Okay, so first thing to note with this light bleed effect, the default shadow setting, if you go to the render setting there, it's set to ESM, okay? And now I don't know what these stand for, but there's two methods, VSM or ESM. VSM will always produce much more accurate shadows and lighting, always. It uses double the amount of memory, so I don't know if that actually contributes to render time or not, but double the amount of memory straight out of the gate, but it's worth it. It works far, far better. You might not think that because you first of all get this splattery effect, because this should be on by default, but high bit depth, you check that and all that weirdness goes away. Now, just to compare, this is ESM, this is VSM. You can see the difference in the light bleed. VSM produces far less, right? It's still there though, but it's far less. The other way you can get rid of light bleed is by adding thickness to an object. So with our solidifier modifier here, if I increase this, you can see if I increase it far enough, you can see that the light bleed eventually disappears. And the reason this is happening is like basically the light, I'm not sure if I talked about this or not, because this is the sixth time I've recorded this tutorial and it all just blends in my head. But anyways, the thicker the object is, like at a certain point, it will start. It's almost like there's a resolution to the whole scene, like kind of like a volume, like little pixels, but in a volume. And once something has a sufficient amount of thickness, it starts to be detected as like an object that should be casting shadow, right? So when you've got something that is, really thin like this, it's not detecting that that's actually something that should cast shadow. So just something to keep in mind. So there, like, you can just increase the thickness of things, but obviously you don't want to go something like this thick, because now look at this bank vault of a wall, right? Nobody is going to want that in an architectural render. So that is a method to fix it, but it's not the method I would suggest. The part of the reason this is happening is because this lamp has softness on it. And actually, actually it wasn't really happening there, but anyway, one thing you're going to want for a lot of architectural scenes is softness, right? Because for this actual scene that we're building right now, we want to have the appearance of like skylighting that is like throwing like overcast light into the environment, right? So you want to have smooth, soft lighting like this. The trouble is that this softness value here, it's not doing what you would think. It's not doing like what would happen with cycles when you increase the size of a light. When you do that, it would actually like increase the areas that it would actually throw light to, like real, physically accurate light in the real world. In Eevee, all it's doing is it's taking this sharp edge here and it's just blurring it, right? Which is not good, right? It's not accurate. And once you get to a certain point, like, look, you can see we get softness that's actually blurring into the scene now. Actually, let's increase the, let's increase the amount of light coming in here. You can really see it now, right? So this softness value, I originally thought like, yeah, I need softness. I need softness to make my scene look nice. But this value, it was just destroying it. It was horrible, right? So I discovered that if you want soft lighting like this in Eevee, the way to do it is underneath shadows, you want to check soft shadows. Now, when you do this, you might not see that anything has changed. But basically what this is doing now is it will actually basically make this lamp behave a little bit more like a real cycles light, like a physically accurate light. It's based on the radius value here. So as I increase this radius, you can see that light is now actually spreading around into different places. So different parts of the scene are getting different amounts. The light is hitting in different areas, okay? So you can see like that circle around the light there, that's actually the radius. So imagine this is like a ball of light. So the bigger that ball is, the more like some light is actually now going to be hitting the ceiling or like on the wall there or whatever. So it does this kind of like splattering effect. It says that like, okay, the light is this circular size, so I'm going to put a lamp here, 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 here. It's going to randomize its placement, and it's going to do this splattering. And then you get basically like a softened light effect, like you would see in the real world or with cycles. And by the way, the splattering effect is dependent on the number of samples. So the viewport is set to 16, but if I increase this to 128, you would see that it gets smoother and smoother and smoother until it's like that jaggedy effect becomes not noticeable, essentially. Yeah, so it will increase the render times, definitely, but there is like no better way to get softer light and light that behaves like real lighting than using soft shadows, turning that on. Okay, now, what was I going to talk about? Oh yeah, so I've still got some light bleed happening, but let's not worry about that yet. I want to talk about the correct lamp to use, because there's a sun lamp, there's a spot lamp, and there's an area lamp. The default one, of course, that I've been dealing with is just the point lamp. The best one I've found is actually the area lamp. I would love to use the sun lamp. The sun lamp is cool, does actually a pretty decent job. It's better than most people say. The amounts here are way too much out of the gate. It does an okay job, but I've just found in comparison to the area lamp, the detail around objects, like the feet of things, I've changed all the settings. Like it just doesn't do as good a job as an area lamp. So what I'm going to do is just at the place of that lamp there, I'm going to delete it, and I'm going to add in an area lamp. The reason I'm adding in a completely new object instead of changing it is it's a little janky when you just like change this value here or whatever. It can just not do things properly. It's a little buggy. It is beta so far. So I'm just adding an entirely new lamp. Let's make it really bright. 8,000. 80,000? Maybe? Something like that. Okay, so as I mentioned, the size of this area lamp here is going to be, it's going to affect how far this light spreads here. So the higher I set this to, the more that light is going to be splattered around there, which if I'm creating overcast lighting, which I am, I want it to splatter around quite significantly. Now, I want to mention this point because I've seen a lot of people suggest this, and that is to fix like all the light bleed issues, to fix all this softened light, all this kind of thing, put the lamp in the window. So this is what a lot of people I've seen suggest do. They put maybe behind a curtain or something like that, you put the area lamp here, and it's great. Look at that. No more light bleed. You've got light just coming in through the window. Things are probably going to be fast. You probably don't even have to have soft shadows turned on. It's like it removes a lot of problems. The problem with this is that it sounds good in theory, because you think about an interior, you've got light coming in through a window, so you would think that the light source is the window. But that's not actually true. Like, that's not the origin of that light. The light is from the sky or the sun. And those things are not like a solid point of light from the window. That's what it would look like if you had like a giant LED panel in your window. You would have light that looks like this. But if you've got lighting from the sky, light comes down because it's directional. It comes from above us, so generally most of the light is hitting the ground, some of it's hitting the wall, but you wouldn't really have any hitting the ceiling unless you were on a really tall building and you had the sun on the horizon, maybe. But you wouldn't have this. The real, whatever you call it, just to show you the difference, right? Look at the ceiling now in comparison to where it was, right? Now the ceiling is in darkness and the light's hitting the floor. This is how light looks in the real world. You can see why having it in the window there is just not desirable. The other problem, just to mention this, because there is another reason why you don't want to do this, is because of the inverse fall-off method, which is how light is calculated in the real world and also in Blender. Inverse square law. I talked about it in my lighting series. We talk all about the science of lighting, and I go into detail on fall off and how important this is to understand. If you haven't checked it out, click up there and you can watch that series. Very important. But just briefly, having the point of light start right here, that means that if you've got this chair right here, and then let's say you've got another chair that's like right, say there, the amount of light that's going to be hitting that chair leg, that armrest, is going to be 4 times the amount of light that's going to be hitting it there. If it is double the distance from that point of light to here, double that distance, it's going to be 4 times less. It's called the inverse square law. Sounds crazy, but it's actually true. And I show you in the lighting series why that actually does happen in Blender as well. So this is crazy because coming from the sky or from the sun, when you've got real natural light coming into the scene, you're not seeing almost any fall off at all, because the sun or whatever is going to be, imagine this, but way, way further, 200 billion kilometers, I believe it is. The amount of fall off is drastically less, right? So you want to have the light outside the room in the same position above, basically, as what the real sky would be. Otherwise, you're not going to get any sort of realism in your interior. So just wanted to bring that up. We are going to use an area lamp, and we do want it to match the size of the sky. But yeah, having it in the window is just a bad idea. So let's increase the size of this. Because we're making the appearance of like an overcast sky, and that is basically wrapping around, we want like the corner of that square there, right? Like that, because of how big it is, it's now going to be throwing light on that wall, right? That's why this size here is important, because that's how it works in cycles and everything else. Anyway, so look at this. We've now got some like proper looking light coming into the scene. It's soft looking light. We have a little bit of bleed, okay? But the reason I mention this like right at the end here, now that we can fix it, is because now we can change this bleed bias amount and we can actually fix this, right? So just about there, 0.07. And it's gone. No more light bleed. And now as I move my camera around, I don't have that contact shadows that was causing all these weird glitching things. It's actually shadowed the way it should be, right? So now that you've done it correctly, things are going to get a lot easier later on. So let me just change the color of my light here because I want it to sort of look like the color of an overcast sky, which if you saw my lighting series, you'll know about color. The Kelvin scale measurement for like an overcast sky is around like 7,000, 8,000 Kelvin. Unfortunately, you don't have a Kelvin scale in Eevee for the point lights yet, but it's basically like a light blue color. So that's what I'm trying to go for here. Okay, and we will, in the next part, or a future part, whatever it is, however long this tutorial series takes, we will get to contact shadows, because there is a point to them, but you just don't want to use it yet, because it's like, you got to be very careful with it. So anyways, we've covered the lighting. We've got some nice, decent looking lighting, and I'm just trying to stall to make sure I haven't forgotten anything else that I want to bring up. Bleed, yeah, bleed is really how you do it. Oh, and also I was going to say, the solidify value, you don't want to really go higher than around about this, like 0.05. Sorry, 0.5 is about as thick as you want your wall to be. Anything thicker than that, and it just starts to look a little bit ridiculous. So you go as thick as that, and then you make up the rest with your light settings. Now we're just about ready to jump into the next part of the video, but I'll just finish with a final sign off and say that there is a lot of news in 3D, AI, machine learning, all that stuff, and it's hard to keep a track of it, right? New techniques, new tutorials showing new methods. So I've got a newsletter list, which is once a week, and it's 3 to 5 links that I find interesting that week. So if you enjoy this tutorial, I think you'd enjoy learning from this newsletter list. So the link is in the description. It's just once a week, and it'll just keep you up to date on the 3D industry. With that little pitch out of the way, you can go ahead and join me in part 2 of this series, and we are going to get into reflections, adding windows with transparency, background settings, all that kind of stuff. So go ahead and join me in the next part.